every paragraph in this book is just like, wow, wow, wow. Like, it's just, this book is pure aesthetic. This book is like pure feeling and aesthetic. So I've already been to a book club for this book. I've written 2 reviews, but there are still things I need to say about this really good book, On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. If you're new here, hi, my name is Liam, and I write a lot of reviews on Goodreads. I have been for about 5 years, and recently I've been a bit more active on Instagram. You can find some of my stuff up there. But yeah, I just love reading books. Normally I read classic fiction, but because I went to a book club which picked this, I thought, okay, I'll try this. It's a relatively new book. Ocean Vuong is quite active now. This was his first novel. It's really good. Normally I don't read contemporary novels, but this author has caught my eye, partly because of their identity as a Vietnamese author that's up and coming in just Western literature. It's always nice to see more diverse voices, and also because they write poetry, and I have a bad time finding male poetry that I can get on with. Like, guys that write poetry, for some reason I just can't normally get on with them. They're just too physical. They're just too I'm thinking mainly of British romantic poets, but I really like a lot of contemporary female poets, mainly in America. So I was interested. A male poet writes a novel for the first time, and it's quite a hit on Instagram and everything. So I thought, all right, I'll try it, because this book club also said I should read it. And I did really like it. I'm 29 now. I think if I read this when I was a teen, I would have absolutely loved this, because it's so melodramatic. It's so emotional. And when you're young, when you want to read books which have like feeling and so much raw power and intensity, it's kind of what you want when you're young. And of course, there's a lot more of that now than there used to be when I was a teen. But this is a kind of at the level of like an adult novel, so it's mature. It is looking back on the life of this author. So this book, On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, is an autobiographical coming of age story of the author Ocean Vuong, of his childhood, which this has so much suffering and pain in, and the author describes it in this way, and you wonder what was the purpose for this. So it's written like an epistolary novel, which means it's like a letter, and this book is a letter to the author's mother. The thing is, his mother can't read, and among other things, she can't read English. She speaks Vietnamese, which is a key point in all of this, that the author Ocean Vuong had to act as a translator for his own mother, and there was the role that played in the communication of his growing up and his kind of connecting with family. It's very, very personal, and it's very, very powerful. For a quick summary of what this book might be like, it reminded me very much like Red Dot by Anne Carson, which is a fragmented narrative of a drug-fueled relationship, which is LGBT and has a lot of Greek references to it, and it's just really fragmented. That plus Citizen and American Lyric by Claudia Rankine, which just has everyday observations of being oppressed by your identity, be it racial or gender. And so you kind of like mix those two together, and then you just have a very kind of almost the sorrows of young Werther by Goethe. It's not that extreme, but it is melodramatic in its tone. So if you took those 3 books, you sort of just like mixed them together, and then you made a contemporary book, you might have this. It's just a random excerpt that I'm just gonna... Okay, right. Sometimes at night, the girl asleep, Lan stares into the dark, thinking of another world. One where a woman holds her daughter by the side of a road, a thumbnail moon hung in the clear air, a world where there are no soldiers or Hueys. The woman is only going for a walk in the warm spring evening, where she speaks real soft to her daughter, telling her the story of a girl who ran away from her faceless youth, only to name herself after a flower that opens like something torn apart. That is a very good example of what we have on display here. It's just so just so colourful. Here's another one. The clear voices of children, two, maybe three, then a man's, a father. They were playing in the backyard. Not a game exactly, but an embodiment of vague excitement, the kind known only to very young children, where delight rushes through them simply by running across an empty field, not yet recognized as a tiny backyard in a shitty part of town. From their shrill cries, they were no older than 6, an age where one could be ecstatic just by moving. They were little bells struck to singing, it seems, by air itself. Like, every paragraph in this book is just like, wow, wow, wow. Like, it's just, this book is pure aesthetic. This book is like pure feeling and aesthetic. So there's not enough of a plot here for me to even bother telling you that this is the story of someone growing up through a lot of pain and trying to find beauty in it. And I think that is all you need to know whether you want to really explore this. But here are some of my other thoughts. It's a little tricky to talk about this book because normally when you talk about fiction or literary fiction, the goal is to work out how the author has generalized about what happens in reality. You know, this person, do they fall in love or does someone die? And is it symbolic of something that happens to all of us? Is it a tale which has a moral to it? We kind of have to piece together how realistic is this, how relevant is this, and how original is this, how expressive is this, how kind of new is this. But when you're dealing with a book like this, an autobiography that's quite painful and personal and very direct, it's almost, in terms of like psychology, it's like a case study. It's of such an individual account that it's very hard to find any assumptions that are made because everything is valid here. It's human experience. Whereas in fiction, where the author creates a character or something, it's almost more of like a study of just human nature. Like here are these types of people. Whereas this is really just him, and everyone in the story is identified by their real relations to him. So there's no real blurring of the fiction here, which makes it more autobiographical than most memoirs, to be honest, because normally there is some veil that is needed to allow an author to write so raw and candidly about things. So there's a lot of trigger warnings here, like a lot of trigger warnings. It's just quite sad, but it's very, very interesting because it's, although it's a sad read, you can see here that it doesn't feel like a chronicle of failure. It feels like despite all of that, a book this amazing could be written. Like, despite all of that, they continue. And I think that's the main message Ocean Vuong wants to get through all of this. In the late chapters, he says, I remember learning that saints were only people whose pain was noted. I remember thinking you and Lan should be saints. And when he says that, it makes sense. The story is chronicling all of the pain that was just never noted for his mother and his grandmother. And so it's almost a memorial for his upbringing. It's a thank you for his upbringing. And I think there's just a lot of it's almost like a victory in it. Like, he's proud of it, and there's something very cool about that. I don't know, it's really hard to explain. It's almost like it's quite brave to write something like this, and I think there's a lot of weight will be lifted through writing this. And reading it, you can almost experience what it must feel like to go through things and then just let the whole world know and just let it off your chest. And so it's a heavy book. Like, On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous is a heavy confessional book, but the author does it in such a nice way that it doesn't feel like it's trying to drag you down with it. It's trying to show you how much pain can happen and still things can be okay. And so there's almost an unspoken optimistic message to this book that I think only really comes apparent towards the end, when that sentence is said, that the message here, the motive here to write this is just to pay tribute to all of the struggle that happened before Ocean Vuong became big enough to write this novel and to win all the poetry awards that he won previously. And it's really wonderful. The language in this book is so amazing that, like, almost every sentence feels like it could be a part of a poem. And I just really, really love how vivid everything is in this book. So it's very expressive. And so, yeah, Ocean Vuong is like the first male poets I can really like relate to and really get on board with. And I do want to read his other poetry. And there's so many themes here, but again, it's such a personal book that, unlike other books, it's hard for me to really dig into them. I honestly felt kind of seen when I saw Ocean Vuong write that he was a short Asian male. When was the last time that you just saw a story which had a short Asian male writing about their feelings? Like, that's just strangely too rare in fiction. Or at least in the fiction I'm reading, so it was quite good to see that identity reflected. So I went to a book club. I go to some book clubs in Oxford that I just found on Meetup, and one person who really I was trying to talk to the book. I think I wanted to talk about the book more than most other people, but one of us also wanted to talk about this, so I sat with them, and one of the main things we wanted to talk about this book is how come everything went so bad. Which is not like a nice thing to say about someone who's real and done a chronicle, but it's like, what made all this happen? Because it just seems so much pain. I mean, maybe it's just, this is just all of the bad stuff and there was good stuff too, just sort of focusing in on it. But one thing we thought that might have just triggered everything was just that the father wasn't there, the grandfather wasn't there. It was like the absence of having a male figure in the house for like stability, but it never touches upon that directly. It's almost like there's an absence of the narrative of the absence of the father in this book, and everything else around it is almost the result of that, or very indirectly the result of that. I mean, obviously some stuff might have just happened by chance and you can't fully put someone's explain things like that retrospectively. It's a bit like arbitrary, but it does, like, it seems to be something like there. Like, you do wonder if there had been more help, would this have all happened the way it did? Because the novel is really trying to pay praise to what was there and what they did have. And I think that shows a lot of the grace of Ocean Vuong, and also even just the thank yous at the end. He thanks every Asian American artist who came before him. And I just thought that was so cool. I just think that's just so cool to do that. And also there's a deep bow to James Baldwin. So Giovanni's Room, there's a lot of similar kind of the discomfort of the kind of relationship dynamics in that. Kind of, I felt it here. And Anne Carson as well is mentioned here, which I think is why I see Red Dog. Roland Barthes, the as an essay, which is referenced a lot in this, which I haven't read, but it sounds interesting. I'd like to dig into that. So it's great to see contemporary writers that are kind of still making sure that literature has power, has raw feeling, and stays true to lived experience. So yeah. Basically, I loved it. if there's any way I think this could be better, is if there was just more focus, more structure, more. It's kind of. It wouldn't be it if it wasn't that. It's just very intense and very much one thing. So you do just wish it was more balanced, but you know that if it did do that, it wouldn't be quite what it is. So it's almost an intense fragment of something that could be even bigger. Like if there was even more to this and it was put into a much bigger perspective, like if this could become more of an epic novel, I would like it even more, I guess. So with that, I think I've said as much as I want to say. It's something that you just got to experience for yourself. It's not really a plot-driven thing, although it is very much a plot. It's about the feelings and how real and raw it is that you can't know until you know. You just need to know if you like poetry or not. If you do like poetry, then you'll love this. That's all I want to say. Happy reading.